Evening Spotlight. It's our pleasure to welcome to the studios tonight Dr. Indra Abeksekara, who is an MSc Wales, MCom Macquarie University in Sydney, and his PhD is also from Macquarie. He's an associate of the Chartered Management Accountants, and the other one, CPA, stands up for something to do with Australia. He's a lecturer in the Department of Accounting and Finance, the Division of Economic and Financial Studies. Indra, could we start with your research areas? What have you been concentrating on?
Certainly. My main research area is intellectual capital. I have been looking at intellectual capital in Sri Lanka for a long time, since 1998.
And how would you define it?
Intellectual capital are the intangibles which are not captured by financial statements. So often what happens is that organizations tend to ignore the importance of intellectual capital. It's a gamut of items. When we talk about intellectual capital, we are referring to things like intellectual property, the management processes, systems, technological systems, the brands that organizations have, distribution channels, customer satisfaction, then the knowledge of employees, the relationship that management has with employees, and so forth. It's a gamut of items, but the fact is that all these items are influencing the performance of an organization. If it is a private organization, you would see it's influencing their profits, and also it's influencing their share prices. But why it's so important in today's context is that the intellectual capital items, the products and services that are being produced by organization, can be easily copied. And in today's environment, you find that there's pirating, there's imitation, and all sorts of things. If you come up with something very successful, your competitor tends to copy them or pirate them.
And this is illegal, isn't it?
That's absolutely correct. But they would try to circumvent the legality in different ways. But the fact is, it's getting copied and imitated. So what companies have to do today is to associate their products and services with things which cannot be copied that easily. Things like the brands can't be copied. The satisfaction of the customers, the customer satisfaction, that can't be copied. Distribution channels or the distribution points, it can't be copied. Or the knowledge of employees, or the innovative qualities of employees, those can't be copied. And that's why intellectual capital is so important, and it's in fact influencing business performance far more than the tangible assets in organizations.
Now, I know about Macquarie University because Yasmin Gunaratne was there, and I think she still is there. What exactly did you do for your PhD there?
Well, my PhD was based in Sri Lanka. I was studying intellectual capital reporting of the top listed companies in Sri Lanka. So it's my findings are directly related to Sri Lanka.
In what ways?
In number of ways. One is I chose Sri Lanka because Sri Lanka has a number of important features. One is that most of these studies have been carried out in developed countries such as Australia, United States, Canada, and UK. But there was a vacuum of studies like this being carried out in developing countries. It's important because whether it's a developing country or a developed country, all businesses are competing at an international level, either directly or indirectly. So when you produce your products and services, you are in fact competing on an international basis. So I thought Sri Lanka is important because we have to find out what developing countries, the firms in developing countries are doing. That's one. And the second is that the Code of Intellectual Property Act was revised in 2000 by the government, and the reason was to give a boost, to create an environment, business environment, for businesses to thrive and to encourage innovation and so forth.
Does any of your work have anything to do with the World Intellectual Property Organization?
Well, intellectual property is a subset of intellectual capital. but it is not the only item. Intellectual capital includes intellectual property like patents, copyrights, and trademarks, and also things like management processes, technological systems, brand, customer satisfaction, and all intangibles which are not being captured by financial statements.
Indra, what are your present activities?
As an academic, the two main activities, one is obviously is teaching the undergraduate students, and also I'll be teaching the postgraduate students, especially in financial accounting and management accounting, and also the research activities that we had to carry out to produce new knowledge and share those knowledge with organizations and other stakeholders. And my research activities are mainly in the area of intellectual capital, emotional capital, and international accounting.
What is emotional capital?
Emotional capital is the capital that organizations use to increase their revenue. Just to give you an example of emotional capital, is that you could. Why is it that people buy Mercedes, for example, and not Toyota or Nissan? Now, when you think of that, why is it that people are paying a premium? Is that the car is different, or is the model is different? But when you really think of it, why people pay a premium for that is because of the pride of ownership. In fact, it's the pride that's commanding an extra premium, extra margin for companies like that.
A form of conspicuous consumption, as Thorsten Wilhelm called it.
Well, you could say so, yes.
Now, would you say something about Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia?
Certainly. Macquarie is very strong in accounting and business studies. In fact, the Graduate School of Management at Macquarie was rated number one for the world's quality of students. It's the world's quality of students. So they're pretty strong in their business and accounting studies.
What exactly is your research project in Sri Lanka?
Well, initially in my PhD, I was looking at the larger listed companies, the top listed companies, and I'm now here to extend the study to look at the medium and the smaller listed companies, because they could have different practices, and each group can learn from one another what sort of intellectual capital practices are adopted by them.
And what are your findings?
My findings so far is that the successful companies in Sri Lanka, they measure and monitor intellectual capital items very well. But the less successful companies are not monitoring and measuring them properly. So that's the core. And what you find is that there are some intellectual capital items in any organization which really drive the performance, and it is the responsibility of organizations to find which intellectual capital items are so influential in their performance to generate profits and to increase share prices, and also to find out what other items are supporting them, and then further to find out what sort of intellectual capital items that they have neglected completely, or in fact negatively affecting the performance of the organization.
How can Sri Lankan companies improve their performance?
Well, my findings show that Sri Lankan companies by and large tend to focus on the domestic market. Well, that is, as I say, it's a short-term strategy, because short-term the Sri Lankan market is bounded by the number of people you have, by the population, and also by the affordability of this market. So Sri Lankan companies should think more strategically, long term, to go into the overseas market, because then you got, a greater number of people, and also probably you can increase your margins, especially if you try to penetrate into developed countries' markets.
Could you give some examples of that?
Well, there are a number of companies who have done it very successfully. There are companies which have gone into the developed countries' markets and are enjoying, as it is now, they're enjoying very good margins, and in fact they are holding market shares, reasonably strong market shares, competing with multinationals and so forth. But one of the problems is that you got to invest and you got to venture out. And the second problem I see here is that some Sri Lankan companies are in fact collaborating with other foreign companies to bring their brands to share profits here. But when they are doing that, they got to be a little careful, because they have to make sure while they are promoting the foreign brand, they also promote their own brand. Otherwise, what would happen is they would undermine their own brand while promoting someone else's brand, although in short term you are making profits as a company, but in the long run your brand is lost, and the other brand that has been brought in from a foreign country has been promoted and they have gained the market share.
Could you give some examples?
Well, for example, take all the beverage brands, the popular beverages that we have. What we see is that if you walk down on golfways, you would see only one brand, one beverage brand on the huts of these golfways where they sell beverages. And if I'm an alien just coming for the first time, or a foreigner who is coming for the first time into this country, I would think, oh, there's only one brand here, and it's only Coca-Cola. But the fact is, you can't. Well, it is good. You have to associate with foreign companies and so forth. But at the same time, you also must promote your own brand, and so that strategically you position yourself in the long term.
So in other words, one cannot depend entirely on indigenous sources.
Well, today it's an international environment, so we have to share. We have to share knowledge. We have to share brands. There's no question about it. What I'm saying is, while you're sharing brands of others, you also should share your brands and your customer satisfaction, your distribution channels to your advantage. And if you do have some brands which are known domestically, you should reinforce that. Not only that, you should also take the next step of promoting them in overseas market by entering into collaborations or venturing by yourself.
Indra, what do you do when you're working? How do you spend your leisure?
Well, when I'm not working, given the work that's on me, I of course, there's not so much leisure time, but I do make a point. I go to the gymnasium. I love going to the gymnasium and doing bit of weights. I'm not a heavy weight lifter, but I like doing weights. I like jogging. I jog very frequently, almost every other day. So and then of course I watch TV and so forth.
In reading?
Oh, absolutely. I read a lot. I read heaps. And in fact, internet, if you use it quite carefully, I think internet is a very good source of information. And you can do a lot of reading today on the internet and access the latest information. And also the other media like radio and newspapers.
The only thing I hope is that with all these innovations like the internet, that people won't stop reading books.
Today you find books in audio form. I find it very useful. In fact, when I'm in Australia, I usually buy the audio form because that saves me time. Because as I drive, I put the CD on and I listen to. Otherwise, it becomes a sort of waste of time, looking around on the traffic. So it gives you some information and knowledge and some wisdom.
And how do you see the future in your areas of activities?
You mean in relation to Sri Lanka? Well, Sri Lanka, I think the greatest asset that Sri Lanka has is their human capital. No question about it. The literacy rate in Sri Lanka is 92%, and compared to the average literacy rate in a developing country, which is about 66%. So Sri Lanka is well ahead of in relation to human capital. But what the government and other regulatory institutions should do is to create opportunities to harness this human capital. I think that's the important point. They should create environment so that the people can use their potential, and the country and the organizations would benefit.
I've been talking to Dr. Indra Abesekara, lecturer, Department of Accounting and Finance, Division of Economic and Financial Studies at Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. At the controls was Kalyani Egodage. This is Dayanda Silva ending tonight's edition of Spotlight.